Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to the live show. This is the debut episode of the StreamCave here on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube. Here, I would say as always, but this is the premiere episode, so there's no such thing as always. There's no past history to be discussed. So, here with me, as I hope to be always in the soon, distant, and near to be future, I don't know what the hell that means, I have Mr. Super Dopey, Mr. Gary Ferguson. How you doing, Gary?
Hey everybody, how's it going?
Streamer extraordinaire, and to his left, I think, is the young and beautiful Miss Erin, also known as Darth Mutter. How you doing, Darth?
Good. How are you doing tonight?
Good. Um, I'm going on a wing and a prayer and assuming that everything is working here right now. So, if you have never attended an episode of the show, which you haven't, because this is our first episode, this show has been a long time in the making, actually. I have for subscribers and visitors to the E2KG channel, and obviously we do comic books and video games and geek television and movies, but two podcasts that I've wanted to get together for a very long time have been one that this show is not, which is a show about just tech, which we used to do over at Geeks Worldwide for a while, but also this show, which is a show about live streaming. And what we've wanted to do for a while is put together a show that talks about the tech, software, and services, as well as the social issues, social dynamics, and the culture around live streaming. It's one of the most dynamic, diverse, and energized areas of technology and gaming and society today. It's a strange confluence of social media and gamers and content creators and video game companies and so on and so forth. It's kind of the apex of what has been brewing for the last, 40 something years in the video game industry. And I don't know of a show that specifically is dedicated to specifically hyper focusing on live streaming and streamers specifically. Other video game shows, podcasts kind of do it as by the way, and as little sections and segments. But this is going to be a show that's dedicated to, I almost wanted to say to the art of live streaming, but to the science and the technology and the art and the personalities around live streaming. So we anticipate having guests on the show. We're going to talk very frequently about members of our streaming community, the Next Level streamers, and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to go with ladies first. Darth, and let you start off, just as a matter of us getting to know each other and also for the viewers getting to know each other. Give us very quickly kind of a 1.5 minute intro of your geek, gamer, and streamer backstory.
Well, I am Darth Mutter 87. I like to call myself a casually competitive gamer. So, I've been playing video games basically my entire life. I started playing video games around 4 or 5 years old, and I've switched over from console to PC to handheld. I've played pretty much all of the consoles that are available. I do like to play RPGs and shooters, but I like to keep a variety in my stream. I like to take requests and play pretty much whatever tickles my fancy.
Very cool. And Super Dopey, why don't you hit us with your geek, gamer, and streamer backstory?
All right. Really similar to Darth, I've been playing video games since I was really young. One of my first memories is actually playing Super Mario with my mom when I was sick one day home from school. And it's kind of blossomed from there. Live streaming has actually been a newer venture of mine as of the last, 6-ish months, I'd say. Before that, I did a lot of LAN parties. I did a lot of competitive gaming, small local tournaments. And video games has kind of been a way for me and other family members of mine and friends of mine to kind of bond. It gives us, it's kind of a catalyst for us to be able to talk and to bond and to do other things. So it's kind of been a focal and a center point in my life where I can make connections with other people, and streaming to me is a way to take that kind of to another level or a different avenue. And so that's something that's really exciting to me, and why I'm excited to be a part of stuff like this. So that's kind of my background in history is, I make connections with people through video games, and I want to continue doing that.
Very cool. Thank you so much. And most of you guys who have watched the network for a while kind of know where I come from. I've been gaming for a very long time. It's kind of been one of my primary sticks and vectors of content creation and conversation and discussion, as we do over on the Enough to Keep Going weekly gaming podcast. I'm a person who likes to dive really deep and get super detailed about games. And when streaming came along, it was kind of the next big technical challenge after living through the years, if you guys remember, of figuring out how to rip audio and burn them to CDs, and then rip video and burn them to DVDs. The next video challenge in terms of technical depth kind of came along, and it was streaming. So I dove deep on that to try and kind of crack that nugget and figure out ways to do reviews and share information out as a common resource for people to come to get information. So one of the segments we're going to do each week, I'm sorry, each week, I'm locked into this weekly cycle of some of the other podcasts. One of the segments we always want to do at the top of this show is have a quick discussion of what we've personally been streaming, and what has been maybe some of our best streams this week, our highlight streams. So Gary, I will defer to you to kick that off.
Okay. I know that we all kind of collab this week, so I'm going to kind of reach out somewhere else in an effort to switch it up a little bit. Now, I wasn't personally streaming. However, I was participating in somebody else's stream. So there's this new game that I've been really addicted to lately called Atlas. And it is an open world live server type of deal where you can attack people's bases, whether they're online or offline. It's made by Wildcard, which is really similar to Ark, if anybody's familiar with that. And so there was a group of people that were constantly offline raiding people, and there's no offline defense set up in the game at this point. So it's basically, shooting somebody in the back, so to speak. And so me and my company of people, a couple, two, three of us, actually went on and took down the strongest clan of people on the server as a matter of justice, sort of like a Robin Hood thing, so to speak. We totally destroyed their base, took all of their loot, and divvied it up to all the people that they had previously raided or hurt or destroyed their bases. And so for me, it was kind of a means of justice, although it is a pirate game. And offline raiding people is a very piratey thing to do. We just made sure to return the favor, and it was just a 2.5 hour chunk of time where we just absolutely decimated these guys and took them for everything that they were worth. And that was really satisfying to me, because I'm a very Robin Hood type person when it comes to those games. I enjoy helping new people, and I kind of like kicking people off their high horse a little bit. So that was really satisfying to me to be able to do that to those guys, and it was really fun. It was kind of it was jam packed with action and explosions and gunfire and fire and all sorts of just crazy stuff. And so that was a lot of fun to be a part of. And it was also really cool because the company that we did that to ended up seeing the live stream and saw proof that we did that to them. So now we spend most of our time on the run as a result of that, because they're trying to hunt us down. But knowing that they saw us exact justice on them was really satisfying. So that was probably my favorite stream that I was a part of this week.
So is Atlas like? Have you ever played Eve online?
I haven't played Eve, but I've seen gameplay and I basically know the gist of it.
Okay. Do you feel like there are similarities between the two in terms of the big thing about Eve is that it is I don't know, I want to say there's no. I mean, it is largely players have large purchase and influence upon the world. Players form factions and organizations, and those factions and organizations have large impact on the world and can influence, large events. Like, players will marshal up at points out in space and go and launch large offensive against large corporations and organizations, and can actually topple them, which can have significant impact, to the servers and the unfolding of the story and the balance of power in the universe. So is Atlas kind of similar to that, or are structures a
Similar
little more
to it.
rigid?
I don't know if the corporations are PVE or not in Eve, but what I can tell you is that they do have specific PVE and PvP servers. However, there's save points that are called free ports, where it's basically meant for new players to kind of get up and running. But you can form companies and, like you said, get together, form alliances, and kind of push forward and attack these different companies. You have different islands that you're on, and if you want to go take over another island, you go over there, destroy their bases, stake your claim, and can take them over. And so with our server in particular, we have a really interesting dynamic, because as the server was growing, it was really passive. Everybody was friendly towards each other. We were all helping each other out, because Atlas is a newer game, and it's a private server. It's an unofficial server that I play on, and so it's a newer server, and so people are kind of trying to feel it out and figure out what's going on. And because there's no offline defense, whereas there are in other games, everybody's pretty much kind of playing nice with each other because they don't want people to come by and offline raid them. Recently, we've had 2 or 3 companies come on board. They're called companies in the game, but it's the same as a clan, that will come together, and they've been inciting violence and trying to provoke other people to create some sort of PvP action in the server. And so the player base does definitely affect the way that the game is played. 2 weeks ago or a week ago, we were playing the game where we were just trying to collect resources and build ships, and it was pretty happy-go-lucky. Well, now we have to worry about who's trying to fight who, and kind of the lines are being drawn in the sand right now for companies that are kind of fighting each other. And so the player base and the type of players that are in the game absolutely affect the gameplay on how you think about when you're going about it. Like beforehand, I would have built a ship that was all about speed and trying to collect gold and treasure maps, but now I need to make sure that my ship has cannons on it. I have to maintain the weight on my ship to make sure that I have as many cannons as possible, but I can still carry materials around. So it totally changes the way that you play the game and your thought process on it, based on the player base and who is doing what and how they're playing the game. So it definitely has an effect on the open world aspect of it.
Okay, very cool. So, Darth, I'm going to go next. Do you want me to take Sea of Thieves, or do you want me to leave that for you?
You take Sea of Thieves.
Okay, so as Gary mentioned before, so probably my best stream of the week was last night, right? Wow, just last night.
Yeah.
So we did a collaborative stream of Sea of Thieves. So I think all 3 of us were streaming on our own individual channels. Darth and Gary both streamed to Twitch. This month I am streaming to Twitter. If I didn't mention before in my intro, one of my things is I review the streaming services. So each month I rotate to a different service. It's less about viewers and more about the experimentation and sussing out all the information and vetting all the different configurations and service offerings for the different services. So I live streamed to Twitter. A bit of a rocky start, and this is gonna be one of our large discussion topics this show, is the increasing importance of cross-platform play, particularly as it pertains to streamers. So, just for farts and giggles, I specifically wanted to live stream and play from PC while Gary and Darth streamed and played on Xbox. A interesting experience, to say the least. We had.
I do play for PC.
Yes, yes. This is not to say these are the only platforms that we play on. But we struggled a bit because pertinent to streamers. Probably, I mean, it's kind of funny when I think about streaming and how, at least in the early days, a lot of it was about being flummoxed by trying to get to a state of decent video quality. These days, the video is almost a gimme. The thing that twists me in knots very frequently is audio. Just getting the audio mix balance set in the opening of your live stream is a huge deal between your voiceover commentary and the in-game audio. If you have party chat and you're doing multiplayer, that is ramping the complexity, and it's a slightly new experience even for me because I don't do a ton of multiplayer. And so that's something that I'm having to come contend with. As I've observed other streams, what I tend to see a lot of is a lot of our friends are very boisterous and loud, and your party chat is, of the 3 audio inputs, your party chat, not you, but the other members of your party are the ones who are loudest. and then you in the game are somewhere below them. And what games don't do a great job of now is giving you fiddles and knobs and levers to pull to manage that. It's also a little bit problematic in OBS because you have to manage those volume levels in the game, um, because OBS typically you're going to tie it. The only thing you can do is tie it to one audio output, and your party's chat and the in-game audio are coming over on the same channel. So maybe it'll be very interesting to see. Maybe in 2019, 2020, we'll see other design implementations in games that give streamers a little more control over that stuff. So, so the problem we encountered last night, principal problem was the in-party chat comes in via the Xbox Live app on PC, which is not something that natively presents itself and gives you the ability to twiddle and fiddle with. Party invites come in via the Windows 10 alert system, the notification system, which happens in the lower right-hand corner of your sys tray in the message bar, which, guess what, is occluded and covered by the game when you have the game presented in full screen resolution. So, needless to say, it was a flippin' dumpster fire of content creation last night. I got very frustrated, more so than I normally do, which was good for a laugh or 12, I'm sure. But then the other thing, there were some other interesting steps that I went through. I was hellbound and determined to not purchase Game Pass, but I missed the $30 sale of Sea of Thieves, and I was like, I don't want to pay $60 for this blasted game. As lots of people know, I'm waiting on Skull and Crossbones, the Ubisoft game of nautical warfare in the Caribbean, which is what I'm really interested in. So I wound up buying Game Pass last night, getting Sea of Thieves and loading that onto the gaming laptop, which you can see behind me. Then we had this whole thing with audio. The gaming laptop presents a problem because it has, well, right now it has like 3 different microphone inputs hooked up to it, and I find it very difficult to squelch most laptops have a microphone array, which they just have some little PIP microphones, typically a couple, hard installed to the laptop in the vicinity of the webcam, usually, making absolutely certain that those things are turned off in software is sometimes hard. Fortunately, the Xbox app does give you the ability to set which audio input you want it to take for party chat. So I was able to, partway into the stream, I was able to go in and specifically select a specific microphone, which I think eventually killed the echo problem that we had. But, last week I was playing Destiny 2, and the problem with Destiny 2 is the in-game chat. The in-game chat doesn't give you that ability. So we were having problems getting 3 people into BattleNet chat, and then in-game we couldn't manage my microphones, because again, I was playing on the gaming laptop. We couldn't manage my microphones to squelch the echo. So, despite that all sounding like it was a horrendous affair, 30 minutes or so into the game, we actually settled in. I started figuring out the control. This is also my first time ever playing Sea of Thieves, so we had that to contend with as well. But we eventually settled in. I started to kind of understand some of the systems in the game and how they related to actually sailing a ship and what the mission structure was. There are some design problems with that game, which we may not dive deep into here. I may push that conversation to the enough to keep going conversation. But all in all, it's still a great social game. I think I'll come down and say at the end of the day, highly streamable. We're gonna come up with some type of term that talks about the streamability factor of a game, because I think that is something different and a new factor in terms of overall game quality that has not historically existed in games. We've historically talked about audio production and progression systems, and we talk a lot on the Enough to Keep Going show about the dopamine cycle, which is how frequently does a game give you that sense of accomplishment, and that you've pulled off something cool. And so there is that in here, but this new factor of the streamability factor, I think is becoming something new. Darth, what was your best stream of the week?
My best stream was probably Friday Night Fights last night. So you guys already know, but Next Level Streamers, we've implemented a new thing that we're doing on Friday Night Fights, and it's going to be we started with Fortnite so far because it's so easy for everyone to acquire. It's free and everybody can join. But hopefully we'll bring some more games in soon. But last night, um, it was a 2v2 situation, and we jumped in the playground mode, I believe. And it was an hour on the clock, and we spent 15 minutes each looting and finding our stuff. And then we all met in the center of the map. And so in the playground mode, there is no storm. So we just, for like 45 straight minutes, we just murdered each other over and over and over. But at first, what was great about it was when you died, it was really hard to get your stuff back. But by the end of this 45-minute of just war between us, there was just so much loot around us that it didn't matter what we picked up. We were just picking up whatever it was and killing each other with it. It was pretty hilarious. Um, and you couldn't turn around without seconds. And it was a really fun time. It really brought us together. And what I liked about it as well is I got some good practice in. So that's something I wanted to talk about with the cross platform as well. To that when we get to that. So
And I apologize. So this is an entirely new recording setup for us, so I'm a little bit flummoxed. My own dials, levers, knobs, and widgets are out of place and in slightly different uh, configurations. So, what did we have? We have something called an agenda somewhere that we're supposed to be running down. Oh, there we go. So, so next segment of the show, we want to talk about small topics. So these are small bits and pieces of flotsam and news stories that we have come across in the past week that, again, are part of gaming news, but also highly pertinent to streamers. I think, again, our sister show, the Enough to Keep Going podcast, talked briefly about the recent news about Bungie splitting from Activision and retaining all publishing duties with regards to Destiny. So there's been some more definition of that news story to come out, specifically in an article on Game Informer. So, so recently in a This Week at Bungie blog post by franchise director Luke Smith, he reaffirmed Bungie's dedication to the franchise. A large focus coming on annual pass content, which is probably a topic that we should get into because that's become a bigger thing, again, not only amongst multiplayer games and games as a service, but also highly pertaining to streamers, because the problem with streamers is, well, it's a weird nexus, right? Because you all of us are predominantly variety streamers. There's a certain degree of variance that we look to have in the titles that we present on our channels. However, that also creates a certain degree of, I don't know if I want to say inefficiency is the right term. There's a certain amount of churn that's associated with that. Other people hyper-focus on one game, and in order for that to work, there has to be constantly new content, or else sufficient content for them to spelunk to make their streaming channels entertaining. Hence, a vector in which the annual pass plays into live streams. There are, Smith was kind of trying to reassure everybody that for the path forward, Bungie is committed to Destiny. And the only thing I can think of that they're speaking to is Bungie has a history of being very progressive in terms of game design and things that they want to do. And so maybe there is some fear out in the community that with the release from Activision that there are... and it's typically the case with development studios that once they've been doing something for a certain amount of time, that they want to go do something else. And then the last, and I think maybe there was some fear or concern that that's what Bungie was going to go do. Another big update dropping on the 29th of January as well, focusing on PvP. So are any of us here big Destiny players? Have friends
I'm not
who are...
personally. I have my cousin plays pretty progressively. He gets into a lot of the progressive content and talks to me and wants me to join really bad, to the point to where he almost purchased Destiny for me just to alleviate some of my commitment to the game. And I will say that what ends up happening and I feel like Destiny has kind of a similar sort of game style to World of Warcraft and Diablo, where you get to end game and then eventually, and at the beginning it's a lot of fun because there are only certain people that progress to certain bosses and to certain content, and really push towards that. And then they're kind of the pioneers on figuring it out, and that's really exciting to be one of the first among them. But eventually what happens is the content has been around for so long, everybody masters it, and then it becomes stale. And so what I see a lot from people that play World of Warcraft, that play Destiny, and kind of has ultimately turned me off from them totally, because I used to play World of Warcraft a ton. I used to be really into it. And to me, Destiny is World of Warcraft in a different skin. When it comes to the core game base. And I don't mean mechanics, I don't mean anything, but what I mean is the overall game experience, where you start off at a low level, you go through the content, the lore is really exciting, and you get your character up, and then you get to end game, you beat the end game, and then there's kind of nothing left to do. They give you daily raids, they give you weekly challenges that are repetitious, that you can do over and over and over again to kind of give you something to do. But until they release a new DLC, until they come out with new content, which sometimes can take a while, you're basically left with nothing to do other than general game content, which you've done again and again and again. And to me, the game becomes stale until they release new content, which kind of plays into the streaming thing that you were talking about, which kind of plays into the replayability of a game. At how many times can you do the same mission every single day before you get tired of doing it and it no longer holds any sort of value to you when it comes to your time? Or it's no longer mentally stimulating to the point where you just get bored of doing the same mission over and over and over again. And so that's what's kind of turned me off is, after the initial excitement of the new DLC, of the new expansion, of the new whatever, after you beat that, there's kind of nothing left to do. Diablo's kind of tried to help that with seasons, and they release new items with the seasons, and that's kind of a step in the right direction, but still trying to figure that out and create constant replayability with those games, it's hard to do, because then you have other problems with I forget the term that is used for it, but basically you end up having to make items stronger and stronger and stronger to keep up with the game, and then you end up with this weird influx of just these trash items in the game in and of itself. And that kind of goes off into something else that's probably a little too deep somewhere else and can be talked about elsewhere. But point being, when it comes to generally streaming and coming up with annual passes and stuff, I think that like, for example, Fortnite, you have your season pass. I think that if you're going to stream Fortnite effectively, having the extra content in the adventure passes or in the season passes, for Ring of Elysium you have adventure passes, there are these additional things that you have to purchase, which for Fortnite isn't a big deal because it's a free game, but there's a lot of other games that aren't free that you have to buy these additional passes to try to create additional content as a streamer. That Agasicles mentioned, kind of creates a churn where, in order for me to be an effective variety streamer, if I want to stream at the same level or with the same content or more content than other people are, that requires more of a time sink for me, because I have to work through those additional achievements. I have to work through those additional goals and missions. Not only that, but it creates an additional monetary strain on me as well, because I have to purchase those passes and that extra content, the DLC stuff for each individual game. Whereas if you were just focusing on just one game, it doesn't create that same time sink, that same monetary sink. So from a streamer's perspective, all of these different passes, they're exciting if you're going to be a singular streamer, but if you're trying to be a variety streamer, it puts an extra strain on you to make sure that you're creating content that's equal to that of other people that are just devoted into one thing. Although that's something that we decide to do as a variety streamer because we want to bring that different content. So it's kind of a nature that we bring upon ourselves for that. So
Yeah, yeah, I absolutely agree with you when you're faced as a variety streamer with the notion of, like, in the span of a week or 2 weeks, you're like, let me get the Fortnite season pass, the Destiny 2 thing, and then, like, these extra packs for these other games, right? And it's a constant wheel and cycle. So Darth, any comments from you on the state of Bungie and Destiny 2 and your own personal perspective on Destiny 2 as a bit of streaming content?
Well, when I found out that Bungie was going to separate from Activision, I was really happy for them because from what it from my perspective of what I read about it, and I didn't read a whole lot about it, but it seemed like Activision was holding Bungie back from some of the things that they may have been wanting to do. Um,
Yeah,
I don't know if that's
that's not an unusual point of contention or sense of friction between a publisher and developer. I too have, and years ago I had an opportunity to go down to Boss Key Studios in North Carolina and actually interview Cliff Blazinski while they were in the midst of developing Lawbreakers. And obviously, as we know, in the years since then, there's been a lot that's come out about the tension between Boss Key Studios in North Carolina and the publisher, and about things that they wanted to do from a gameplay perspective, and that they felt served gamers, but were told or incentivized to do other things that were maybe more about monetization and less about being gamer friendly. So I'm sorry, Dirth.
no, you're
Yeah.
fine. But and to hit on the season pass stuff, like I totally agree with what you were saying about being a variety streamer. I do watch a streamer on Twitch who mainly does Dead by Daylight, and I noticed that they come out with these new killers frequently, but like to keep your viewers entertained, you have to have that new killer and have it right away, and have the up and coming content because nobody wants to watch something that they've already watched. They want to see the newest things out to see if they want to even purchase that item. So it is it is something that has to that goes along with streaming, sure. And playing Fallout 76, I kind of noticed that, um, and along with how that's kind of why I stopped playing Fallout 76 because every time I'd play, it was the same missions, just over and over and over, and it got really dull, and it got monotonous for sure. And but they did say that there was going to be new content coming out, but I haven't anything of it yet.
And the interest. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Gary.
I was just gonna say really quick, talking about having the fresh content, like the newest thing all the time to be exciting as a streamer. I think one thing that we subject ourselves to as content creators in general, and more so as streamers than like YouTube content creators, and it still applies there, but I think more so here. The internet is a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week organism. It's constantly changing, and it's a dynamic being. And being content creators on the internet, we subject ourselves to having to almost literally 24 hours a day staying relevant. And especially if we want to gain popularity, and you said a lot of people do stream to gain popularity and stuff like that, and I know that the three of us maybe don't fit into that mold, but generally speaking, even though we don't want to gain popularity or monetization or whatever, we still want to be entertaining for our viewers, and to stay relevant is something that is a chore almost, where you have to make sure that when I'm playing Sea of Thieves, I want to I'm reading patch notes. I'm looking at new content. I'm seeing who is playing it and why, and to make sure that I understand what's going on, so that when I'm playing the game, that I'm not totally lost. Because as much as people may watch a stream for your personality versus your gameplay, if you're all personality and you have absolutely no idea what's going on in the game, that does get kind of frustrating as a viewer. Because there are certain people that I watch that they're like, I have no idea what's going on in this game whatsoever. And even though they're an entertaining person, that's just, it takes away from it for me. So trying to, and also kind of tying into what I said earlier, the monetary consumption and stuff like that when it comes to new content, you have to take the time to learn and to read those patch notes and to figure out the new mechanics and what's been buffed and what's been nerfed and what's been changed and damage values and all this stuff, so that you at least have an idea of what's going on in the game. And that kind of like what Darth was saying, with new content coming out, you kind of want to be at the forefront of that to make sure that you're bringing high quality content to people. And that's something that I think is relevant in streaming more so than any other type of content creation on the internet, because we are live. I mean, there are people that, like, when there's a new, like, for example, when Blackout launched, right? people were grabbing it and going live the second they could with Blackout, with the new Blackout mode on Black Ops, to make sure that they were one of the first people live, so that people would watch them instead of other people. YouTube, you can release that video the next day and you'll still be one of the first. So that's the strain that we put on ourselves, and kind of piggybacks off of what you and Darth are saying, when it comes to that content creation and new stuff. So I'll stop again, that way we don't go over time. But I just kind of wanted to piggyback on that and say that I mean, across multiple facets of being online in the streaming community, that's true.
Yeah, and one of these days, I mean, we'll get into it, but like one of the things that I find supremely frustrating is my inability to tie down any absolutely certain what's the term I want to use, determinism in the analytics that I see on my YouTube channel. So just I think last night or maybe the night before, I was sitting upstairs waiting for my family to get done with their stuff, watching TV. And usually what I'll do is, if I'm in front of the TV early, I'll bring up one of my own videos from my YouTube channel, just to quality check it and do some spot checks. It was a live stream of Space Marshals, and I don't even know if you guys have ever heard of this game, but like it's a game that'll pretty much play on any Windows 10 machine. It's a little bit sort of like XCOM, but it's real time. It's a top down, like twin stick kind of 3/4 view shooter that takes place. This is not a game that is like a game of the year contender or anything, right? 200 something views on that video, and I just don't understand it, and I'm like, why? Like, of all the things that I've recorded and posted on this channel, why are people flocking to that video? Like, I don't get it. And then you go, well, maybe I should just play games like Space Marshals, right? Like, why am I spending my time racking my head about into Destiny and grabbing the newest Forza Horizon 4 car pack or whatever? But yeah, my biggest problem with relevance is it's very hard to determine what it is, right? It's you buy the season pass on Fortnite, nobody watches that video, but I play some retro PC game from 10 years ago that's like a space sim, and suddenly hundreds of people view the video. So it's all over the place. Anyway, let's move on to talk about how talking about Fortnite, Netflix mentioning that they are competing for eyes with people watching Fortnite. We all know that, and we probably chew on our own cud, getting frustrated with Fortnite and the fact that so many streamers stream it, and many streamers who have many views, and I'm I don't know why people watch one streamer playing Fortnite versus the other. There are a bajillion of them streaming Fortnite. It's a thing, fine, whatever. I don't wish ill on those people at all. I just, much like I mentioned about certain videos on my own YouTube channel, I just don't understand it. I don't want to get into all the things in the aspect of this article, but in a recent investor call with Netflix, whose earnings and views and yada 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 are up because they just print money. One of the things that that was mentioned was that they feel like they are competing almost equally or more so with eyeballs on Fortnite, more so than competing with HBO. Now, what was fairly interesting to me about this was the long-term financial analyst Michael Pachter kind of poo-pooed on this statement, feeling that it was stupid. And I've been a guy who's often felt that Michael Pachter has gotten a bad rap, and gamers have pointed at him as contriving things or making nonsensical business analysis, which I felt is not the case. A lot of that comes from gamers and even people who are just into tech not understanding that financial analysis of the stock market is different than fanboying out over the console wars, which is when Pachter came under a lot of fire. But I absolutely didn't agree with him about this, and this is another topic that has come up frequently on the Enough to Keep Going podcast. But before I go into that, Darth, I wanted to kind of get your perspective on this topic.
When I read what Netflix had said, it rubbed me the wrong way because that's not their avenue. They stream in TV shows, and Fortnite's not always going to be around, but movies will always be around. And I feel like that they're being a little whiny about it. And Netflix has revamped their entire since they've been a company. I remember having to order my disc and it coming in the mail in a sleeve years and years ago before there was ever a streaming service. And they've changed their face, their whole entire thing, and they probably will again in some sort of fashion because tech constantly changing. But I feel like it's comparing apples to oranges. Netflix, I'm sorry that people want to play video games right now. It's just going to be that way. But I mean, and from what I've heard, Disney is about to part with Netflix as well. I think that they need to worry more about that than a video game. So yeah, I guess that's my 2 cents on it.
So, Gary, your own thoughts on this?
So I think that there are kind of two schools of thought with this that you can kind of take, and mine I think is kind of a combination of both. First of all, I think it's really open-minded of Netflix to understand that, and there was a certain quote in the article that I read that or that you sent us that I think really hits home for a plethora of different things. But time is a finite commodity, and so I think that they understand that, and that competing with video games, competing with, as Proctor said, defecating. There's different thing. You're. And I know that you deal with this a lot in particular, Agasicles. You run a particularly busy lifestyle where you literally have to block out certain times for certain things, and it's almost a 24-hour production. Um, and so when people have time that is a precious commodity and they have to spend it and they go, okay, well, there's a new skin released on Fortnite, so I'd rather go play that than catch up on my show on Netflix. So I think that Netflix understands that, but to release something to their investors that says that, where they go, hey, we understand that, we're competing with these things, I think was I'm not going to call it redundant because it's not something that's been said before, but I think it's something that's unanimously understood. Nobody thinks that time is infinite. Nobody thinks that they can just do whatever they want. I think that that's something that's universally understood. So for them to release that in an investor newsletter, I think was excessive because it's something that doesn't necessarily need to be said. On the flip side of that, I think basically what Proctor is saying is, am I pronouncing that right? Proctor,
Pactor.
Pactor. Sorry,
No,
Proctor,
no, no.
Pactor. Is saying is basically like, Netflix, I get that you see this, but just stay in your lane. Is kind of what he's saying. And I get that as well, where he's saying, look, we all know what you guys are saying. This isn't a surprise to anybody. Why don't you, like what Dar said, worry about Disney, worry about other things in your particular market. And I think Netflix is, because you think about your target audience, and you want to make your advertisement and your product available to as large a target audience as possible to increase profit and revenue. And I understand that from a business aspect. So for them to try to broaden it to that, and people who play Fortnite watch Netflix, so there is an overlapping target audience. So I think that they see that. It's just something about it rubbed me the wrong way for sure. Where that it was almost an unnecessary comment, like one of those. Well, I'm going to tell you this anyway, but that goes without saying. Like, well, you just told me anyway. So and so I appreciate their open-mindedness. I think it was an excessive comment to make, and I think that like Pactor said, just kind of stay in your lane and worry about your product. And then they come back later on in the article, and they say, well, you know what, we're not going to worry about addressing our competitors, we're going to worry about creating value in our own product. And so they basically flip script and totally negated what it is that they just said. And so it's kind of an interesting press release for me to go, well, yeah, we're competing with Fortnite, but we aren't going to worry about that, we're just going to make our product better. It was almost like an underhanded comment to me, where it went from being open-minded to sticking their nose in the air, saying that they think that they're better than other people and that they're just going to create a better product and continue doing that. So it was a really bad PR stunt, I think, almost. And I won't call it a stunt because I think that there was some legitimacy to it. And I think Pachter just basically squashed it and said, I don't even know why you guys are saying this. So it was kind of an interesting article to read. And I think that Netflix kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Am I going to unsubscribe from them? Absolutely not, because my wife watches Rain like excessively. So I mean, they still offer a good product, and that there wasn't any sort of like morality issue that I had with it. I just think that their team, they're kind of getting in their own head a little bit, and they need to get out of it. So that was kind of my thought. And initially when I read it, I was just kind of like, yeah, you go Netflix. But then I read the article a second time and kind of read between the lines a little bit and realized that Netflix was trying to, it almost seemed like they were trying to demean Fortnite and other things that consume screen time by saying, yeah, we know we have to compete with all these things, but don't worry, we'll just create a higher quality product.
So,
yeah,
go ahead.
A little bit of it almost seemed like Netflix feels like they get first dibs on our time, on our free time. They get first dibs on what we do in our. How dare someone else take more of our free time than Netflix?
So I'm actually going to take a pretty starkly different stance than you guys have. So a couple of things on just the reality of their statement. Gary, sorry, hold on a second. So Gary, as you mentioned, we're having some people help us out in the chat here by posting links.
I'm logged in under Heather's.
Oh, that's right. Okay, sorry.
So I'm putting stuff under her name. Okay. Sorry.
So on the topic of the reality, and Gary, you spoke right to it, right? We came up years ago with this term of the Renaissance nerd. And as you mentioned, I definitely fall into that category. I have struggled, particularly in the last year, more so now with the advent of streaming and spending time on that, of, the biggest problem today in this world where the nerd has inherited the earth is that everything is now at our fingertips, right? I was a guy who, fell out of his chair when DVD box sets came along. And I was like, this is the greatest thing in the world. Now, I can just go to my tablet or log in, and, every season of The Sopranos is there for instantaneous recall. Managing that influx, that almost assault of content into, as you mentioned, sliceable, manageable buckets is a difficult thing to do. And in fact, to the point where I've I don't want to say that I've given up on TV, but I've isolated and moved away from the notion that I am actually going to consume all the content that I feel like, as a nerd, I'm obligated to be knowledgeable about, right? So, I thank you very much, the CW network and Greg Berlanti, but you're just doing too much superhero stuff, and I can't keep up with it.
Quick touch on that too.
Yeah.
Just for a hot second, is I can't tell you how many people I know, myself included, where we just have internet and we no longer even pay for cable.
Oh yeah,
talking about the getting away from the TV thing. So
yeah,
okay, keep going.
Yeah, no, we cut the cord 6 years ago. So and as you mentioned, it's an assault now of a comic books, games, movies, TV, simple technology, content creation, YouTube, it's I don't want to say it's too much, but it's a lot of stuff, and it's all instantaneously recallable. In my mind, this statement. So first of all, and we are the people that Netflix is talking about, right? We are the people who are creating content and putting a thing out there that they go, and I go through it again. I mean, you guys have been in those conversations, right? I'm in the chat with you guys about streaming, and I go, dudes, I have to stop and I have to go watch an episode of The Sopranos, right? Because that is a thing that is on my calendar I have to get through. So this is what Netflix is contending with. When it drops season 2 of The Punisher, as it has, it's like, man, we really want to get eyeballs on that, but we know that there's this certain demographic of society that is going to go spend time over on Twitch watching people live stream for 3 or 4 hours at a time, and what we want is, we want them to spend 3 or 4 hours binging The Punisher. It's an issue. But my thing about, and so I completely rail against what Pachter said. I feel like as much as that guy has been somebody who I felt was an older dude with a relatively modern time set, I think he has now crossed his apogee, and he's now one of the get off my lawn types who's not keeping up with the realistic dynamics of geek culture and its impact on business. I think what Netflix was saying to investors is, as you mentioned, Darth, Netflix's business model has had to transition, and it's had to transition rapidly because they're out ahead of everyone else, and they keep having to pivot to as you mentioned, Gary, to not become irrelevant. It started with shipping you discs, then they went to live streaming. They were the first on the forefront. Now they've got to do 4K. Then they had to go from, not just live streaming back catalogs, but creating their own original content. The original content business cycle is a long loop. It takes millions of dollars to get something through pre-production to production to dropping, and then time after it drops and that investment is made for that to actually be realized as new subscribers. I think Netflix's comment was speaking to guys like Michael Pachter who are too old to get it, and their investors who aren't steeped in the nerd culture, to get them to understand, hey, it took us a while to get you guys to understand this long loop of creating new content. Now here's this other threat vector. We're going to have to do new things with our business model that are starkly different from what you become accustomed to, and we need you guys to get on board. When we say we're doing this to compete against eyeballs that are going to Fortnite and Twitch, we don't look. We don't need to have a long conversation with you about that. Just give us more money. Let us go do our job and what we understand. We understand the market. We're trying to convey that to you when the time comes. And my sense of it is this is Netflix coiling up to strike out on some kind of new vector in 2019. That might be having their own live streaming service. I think they've done a very good job in leveraging and platforming off of geek culture and geek influence, meaning the Castlevania series, which I was like, what in the flip is this, and why are they doing it? That sucker is turning gold coins, and it's been greenlit for a season 2. And I'm like, I don't understand it, but fine. If it prints money, go do you. And there's some other video gaming content stuff that they're doing on their channel. My kids, they know Spyro the Dragon because of Netflix. They don't know it because of video games. And eventually, whether it converts from Netflix to video games or video games to Netflix, that's still a channel and an avenue of returnable revenue and content. So that's just my perspective on it.
And also for me,
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
think I didn't take into consideration the target audience of the newsletter, and I think that's something. And I did that just because of the where it was posted. As far as we look at it, and it's on GameSpot. So I wouldn't necessarily say retract my statement because I don't want to change my opinion overall. It's still similar, but something that I didn't take into consideration was this is a newsletter released to their investors that somebody else got a hold of. If they release this to the public, I think that I would feel even more strongly about what I said. However, releasing it to the investors and you say, because you think about who's your average investor? It's not us. We aren't investors, although you have smaller degrees. But for people that invest in Netflix are multi-million dollar families, corporations, billion-dollar something, that are investing in these. And let's be honest, some CEO of a company isn't spending his off time streaming or whatever. And so I think that, when I say that it's irrelevant for it to need to be said because it's common knowledge, I think it is for a lot of people. But for somebody who spends a lot of their time running a company and investing millions of dollars, I don't know that they necessarily make themselves privy to that information. So maybe it is necessary that it needs to be said, for that to be done. And like I said, I do agree with the fact that it was open-minded of Netflix to make that. So I do still stick very strongly to that. And I think it's important for the investors to know that, and kind of being business forward in a certain degree. Um, and so maybe it is more necessary than it needed to be said, and I was kind of reading into that a little too far. Like I said, if it were a newsletter released to their target audience, I'd probably be a little bit more infuriated. So the fact that this was taken and it's just something that's being shared to us does change my feeling with that a little bit. I'm not quite as salty about it, based on the fact that they are trying to inform their investors who are not living in that type of environment to make sure that they're aware of it. So I'm sorry, go ahead and continue.
And Netflix is clearly making moves to move towards they already have interactive videos and movies on their services. They're clearly wanting to move over to more of the video game side of things. I don't know if they are going to have video games or, um, like you mentioned, having streaming services for video games. I think that seems like something really plausible that does look like it could be in the very near future. So now that I've you've explained where this letter was directed towards, this could very well be something that's going to be going on soon.
Yeah, it's interesting. And my kids consume that interactive video content. It's like I forget what it is. It's like Stretch Armstrong or whatever, which is like a choose your own adventure thing where it like hits certain branches in the story, and they can use the remote to pick like A or B branch, and like it unfolds a different way or whatever, which I think is stupid with an EW, but that's just me because I never like choose your own adventure was like it's okay. So there we go. So let's take a quick tech minute and talk about pop filters. So I'm going to try to do this. I don't know if this is going to work very well, but wow, I just knocked over a whole speaker and a Funko Pop, and yeah, we're wrecking stuff in here.
So far, so good.
Yeah. So this is a metal microphone, and I thought it was very interesting. You know, we talk about pop filters, and I use one. Do you guys use a pop filter? You're on
This is
headsets.
what I have right here.
Yeah.
I've only ever used headsets. I've never used standalone
Yeah.
mics.
So if you use
This
standalone,
one does need one.
so if you use standalone stand-up mics, use of a pop filter is typically recommended. I don't use one all the time. I like in my content for it to vary a little, and for not for all my audios to not sound exactly the same. It's kind of like I don't know. It's maybe a way of creating kind of the same effect that you get from listening between vinyl versus CDs versus tape. You have that little variance that makes things stick in your memory a little more. But I haven't, admittedly, always understood why you would use a pop filter. So this is the pop filter that I use with my standalone microphones. Usually, I will try and mount them on a stand, or they come on a stand. The stands are typically an industry standard size. Some of them vary a little, and I'll try and get this a little bit closer to the camera. And what you do is you hook this on the side of the tube, right, like if my finger were the stand, and then you rotate this thing until it clamps down on it. And then, again, this is going to be a little noisy because I'm having to demo with the mic I'm actually using to do the show. But then you put the pop filter in front of it. You typically put your, I guess doing a Bill Cosby impersonation isn't in vogue these days, so let me not do that. So you put the pop filter in between you and the mic like so, and it filters out the metallic clicks and pops that can be caused from like a punchy or rapid influx of air to the microphone. What I didn't know is apparently while people talk and sing, they also spit. And apparently it's a really big deal to not get saliva on a metallic microphone like I have here because it will corrode it. I never knew that. I didn't realize that use of a pop filter was actually like, I never thought of it as a thing. I always thought of it as like an audio quality thing, not as a thing to actually protect my investment in the microphone.
I think in radio, I think they call them spit screens in radio business.
Huh. Well, there you go. So basically it's just a big piece of metal with some cheesecloth in between it. They're way back in the day, they used to just make them out of like coat hangers and cloth and material. But there you go. So that's your quick tech minute. There are also things called windscreens, which are a slightly different piece of equipment. Those actually physically go on the microphone. And there are two types, which we'll probably talk about on some later show, but there are wire mesh windscreens where the wire is knitted and woven so tightly together that it would also prevent saliva from coming inbound like a corrosive projectile. And then they also have like the foam ball ones, which also protect the mic. So yeah, go ahead.
For my headset that I have, a lot of them you have, and I've always called these kind of pop filters. I know that they aren't quite that. I think they're more of like what you were talking about, a windscreen.
Yeah, I think of those more as a windscreen. Yeah.
and because I've noticed that it doesn't really do the same thing that a pop filter does. It more so protects from saliva. But just kind of a quick production tip for a lot of people. Now you use a standalone mic, so it's a little bit different for you. But I was literally just talking to Erin about this, and this is something that I don't even know where I learned it, but it made a big difference for me because I used to be one of those people. And sorry for the audio, but I used to eat my microphone all the time, and because I wanted to make sure that people could hear me. And it wasn't until I started streaming and I started having audio issues, my mic was peaking, I was having all of these audio problems. And so I was looking into different ways to fix those. And I was looking into built in condensers. I was looking at all this stuff to figure out how I could fix this really terrible noise. And I realized pretty quickly that all you have to do is move your microphone away from your mouth a little bit and you sound a whole lot better. um, and I know that by no means do I have a high quality headset. I mean, I've got a decent middle of the road. I think it's the Astro Void Pros. I think they ran somewhere to the tune of $60 or $80. So they're definitely on, the middle end of the market, or the lower middle, I guess. I mean, because you can get stuff as cheap as 15 and stuff that's as expensive as 200 as far as in your general headset range, and you're more than familiar with that. But um, I get people that tell me sometimes in my stream, when I'm not excited and yelling and I'm peaking, but when I'm just talking to people in Discord calls, when I'm talking to them in general, they tell me that it sounds like I have a relatively high quality microphone, or that I kind of have like a radio voice, and I know that that has more so to do with something as simple as mic placement. And that's something that I think a lot of people overlook when it comes to production, when it comes to increasing the quality of stuff. Is people just want to talk the way that they want to talk, and then that's it. But if you change the way that you talk and you change your voice inflections just a little bit, if you watch your voice volumes a little bit, you don't even have to worry about things that are post production, like condensers, that are like pop filters, that are things like now. From a maintenance aspect, a pop filter and a spit filter still makes sense. But if you're talking about like a sound quality, um, it's things as little as moving your microphone away a little bit, or down a little bit, or whatever will keep you from having the pops and the hisses from your P's and your T's, and that happens a lot less. And so that just kind of a quick tidbit for anybody that's watching, just kind of a production thing. If you have a headset microphone, do everybody in your life a favor and pull it away from your mouth a little bit. So go ahead.
Yeah, and some mics have, I think, what I also have a unit of the Void Corsair Void Pros that you're using. They have this I call it the military audio effect, which is it's I don't want to call it artificial, but it's a crafted sound that's very deliberate. That I like also from having spent time in the military, and like there's a certain degree of comfort that comes when you hear a voice on that military sounding communications radio, particularly when it's clear. So yeah, I tend to like that as well. So we are just over an hour. I think we wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of cross-platform play games and streaming. I think that's a very big issue. We'll probably queue that up for our next episode at the top. We'll also be covering things on the show like social issues in gaming. So we briefly entertained covering the Overwatch player, whether it was a girl, but it wasn't really a girl, but it was a guy, catfishing incident from a couple weeks ago, but that kind of the apex on that news story in the news cycle kind of hit, I think, a little, and had decayed already by the time we came around to recording this. But we will be covering stuff like that in the future. What we want to do, though, if we don't actually have a guest on board, is we do want to take a little time to sing the praises of a streamer who we are familiar with. Sometimes this will be somebody in Next Level Streamers, which is a group on Facebook that we are all members of. Sometimes it'll be somebody just from one of our streaming platforms, or just, hey, a really cool person who's a streamer that we want to bring some highlights to. Before we get to that, I want to give a few shout outs, and maybe you guys can help me out, because I don't necessarily know everybody who's popped into our chat. But I do definitely want to say thank you to Cruise Control, who has stopped by. Thank you to Shadow Lord, who has stopped by. Thank you much to our number 2 Commander in Chief, to Chris, who has stopped by. And I was going to say, I think I was going to thank Heather, but apparently that's actually Gary logged in.
Yeah, that's me logged in on her account.
Pulling a catfish of himself. Thank you so much to Tater and Switch. Smitch. Wait, Smitch. Yes.
Tater and Smitch.
I had Nintendo on the brain, Erin, from when we were talking about the Switch earlier today. So thank you so much to Tater and Smitch, who has also
Papa Cantos swung by for a quick second.
Yes. Yep.
Papa.
Which is Cantos' finest right now, but he's going through a name change to Papa Cantos because he's going to be a dad soon. So.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of catfishing, as Cruise Control says. So, with that, I want to step over to talk a little bit about Mr. Braxton Adair and his Twitch channel, Braxophone. I don't know exactly how audio is going to cut over. I think it's going to do a slight transition, so hopefully let me hit this and hope that everything holds together here on this good Starship StreamCave. I wonder if he's still live. I hope that he is. Oh, is he not live now? Oh, he's killing me.
That would have been too convenient if he was, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Quick
Yeah.
side note about Braxton. So I was interested because he came up, or how he came up with his name, and actually he was in my stream team. I think the first week that he joined the group, and I was talking about Erin about this a little earlier. So I asked him. I said, "How did you come up with the name Braxophone?" And he told me that he, in some form, and I don't know exactly what it is, but he is going to college for some form of a music major, and he actually plays the saxophone. So he took his name and saxophone and put it together, Braxton and saxophone, to Braxophone. So that's how he came up with his streaming name, was him playing the saxophone. And there was something else that I talked to. So I asked him, I said, as a music major, what is your favorite genre of music? And he said that there's a huge debate about it, but by and large, a lot of people that are music majors actually prefer jazz and classical music, and more in particular, freeform jazz, which is something that I find kind of interesting, um, because freeform jazz, to an untrained ear, actually has next to no musical structure. And so if you don't know what you're looking for or what you're reading or anything, to listen to something that seemingly has no musical structure, and to have music majors enjoy that type of music, is something that's interesting. But the more you learn about music, and the more that you learn about various musical counts and stuff, you learn that freeform jazz is actually a really cool overlay of various counts strung over the top of each other. And now I'm getting into music, which definitely isn't streaming related, but he was telling me about this and why a lot of music majors enjoy watching or listening to freeform jazz and classical music. So I found that kind of interesting. It was a conversation that him and I had when he was streaming one day, and I just kind of wanted to share that as my experience with him. He's a super nice guy, super interactive with chat. Never misses anything. He actually died a couple of times to take the time to, while he was in the middle of a kill streak, mind you, so that's a big deal, to read my chat to make sure that he interacted with me. So really nice guy, really supportive, just like a really genuine personality, and I really enjoyed watching his stream and interacting with him. That one time in particular is what sticks out in my mind. So I just kind of wanted to share that about Braxton in particular while you were kind of queuing that up over there.
Yeah, and Erin, have you had some opportunity to interact with Braxton as well?
Is my mic on? Oh yeah. Yeah, I visited Braxton's stream today because he's on my stream team right now this week, and he was playing the Elder Scrolls in the Bethesda game, so we got into the conversation about Bethesda, which was really fun. I always love finding another Bethesda fan, and so we had a bit of a conversation about that, and that was really fun. He finds Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas are better than Fallout 4 and 76, which I totally agree with as well. So I really enjoyed finding that out about him. But the the thing that Gary brought up about him playing the saxophone, I thought that was really interesting. I love finding out how streamers come up with their names. Cruz said that in the chat as well, and that's one of my favorites so far. Really, but yeah, uh, I'm excited to have him on. Well, he'll be on my stream team for like another day or so. I'm excited to maybe get to know him a little more.
Yeah, it's been very cool. He was on my stream team, I think, last week, and I had an opportunity to drop through and stop through a stream. He was playing a little bit of Overwatch, so very tactically specific about the game and its mechanics and its progression system, so I definitely respect that. That is something that gets a little deep, and everybody doesn't go in as hardcore on and do the breakdowns on their streams. He has also recently built a brand new PC. There seems to be a lot of that going on in next level streamers. And while I appreciate all of you, let's get those things done, and then please stop, because it generates a lot of questions. And I appreciate it, but damn, too many of you are building brand new PCs all at one time. I need you guys to spread that out a little bit throughout the year. But no,
I'm trying to keep mine limping along. I'm not building a new one.
Yeah. As I look at my watch, because I know you say that now, but like right around the corner you'll be building. So,
tax season.
Yeah. So, no, I appreciate all y'all, and I wish everyone the best. I love it when people hit that point where they have the opportunity to build a streaming PC, because I think it's a big deal and I think it's a big help. And quite frankly, if I hadn't found out that was even feasible and possible, I would have given up on streaming, because running OBS on board the same PC that you game on literally used to twist me into knots and frustrate me. So, and I bounced from OBS to XSplit, and then trying to figure the whole. This was also before Microsoft implemented its game DVR, and while Nvidia was dorking around with shadow play, and it was just a mess. So, yeah. So I'm glad to see people having that opportunity. Particularly, it just seems to be taking off in 2019, and I appreciate it. So, that is about all the time that we have. Do you guys have any plugs? You guys should each plug your own Twitch channels, I think.
Yeah, I'll plug it. The twitch.tv/DarthMutter87, DarthMuter87, and I'm also on Twitter, DarthMutter87, Twitter as well.
And like Agasicles introduced me as Super Dopey, it's actually X Super Dopey X, because Super Dopey wasn't available. And it sucks because when I try to use Dopey, I think I don't know why, but a lot of games say that's not available, and I feel like they think it's some sort of drug reference, probably. I came up with the name. So Dopey was my original name. Then when Dopey's not available, I use Super Dopey, because I do some really silly things sometimes. So that's kind of how I came up with my name. Is I'm an airhead sometimes. It's if anybody's seen the movie Moana, I'm the chicken hey hey.
I was just about to say hey hey.
Yeah, I'll eat rocks and jump off a boat. So that's kind of how I came up with the name. Just because I do just things that don't make sense sometimes. So it's twitch.tv/X Super Dopey X for my Twitch, and then Twitter it's the same thing, X Super Dopey X. I do have a Facebook page that's kind of been under wraps that I'm still working on the construction of before it is released, but I am working on being on Facebook as well. So that's my little plug there.
All right, thank you so much. And as most of you guys, I think, hopefully know by now, if you want to catch up with me on Twitter, you can do so at Agasicles Stamus, all one word, 2 S's in the middle. If you want to keep up with the channel and this show and what else is going on the E2KG Network, you can also follow the E2KG Network Twitter page, which is spelled exactly that, E2KG Network, all one word. You can find our podcasts on YouTube, SoundCloud, and Pocket Cast. Please keep up with our other shows. What's Your Issue, our weekly comic book reviews podcast. Enough to Keep Going, our weekly gaming podcast. It's Another Thing, which is our TV show podcast, which specifically covers short season format TV shows. Right now we're covering The Gifted. We'll be shifting over to cover The Punisher here pretty shortly. And It's Another Thing movies, where we kind of keep up with new content dropping on digital streaming services such as Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, and maybe anything else. We're kind of expanding our horizons in 2019. So thanks so much for joining in on behalf of the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, Gearworks.com, the tech blog, and Next Level Streamers on Facebook. That's going to do it from us. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Until next time, happy hunting. Take care of yourself. Stay safe out there. Play the games that you like and stream the games that you love. That's going to do it for us tonight. Good night, everybody. Go get streaming. Yeah, so I have the other scene up now. So